Now, it's time for the Anchormen Podcast with Matt Gaetz and Dan Ball.
Every superhero gets the sidekick they deserve. Batman had Robin, the Lone Ranger had Tonto, and I have Vish Burra. Vish, thanks for joining me as always. I was looking forward to getting the hot takes on this New York mayoral race. I mean, we've had a number of your buddies from the mean political streets of New York on the Matt Gaetz show recently, talking about this guy as a rising figure. I was kind of looking at the messaging. And on conservative media, it's very curated. It focuses on his desire for universal basic income, kind of an open borders energy, I get the sense. But there was a populist message in there, well packaged. This ad I saw, it impressed me.
New York is suffering from a crisis, and it's called halalflation. Today, we're going to get to the bottom of this. How much does a plate of halal cost right now from this truck?
$10.
$10. Chicken over rice, lamb over rice, $10.
$10?
Yeah.
When you're a street vendor, you have to pay for the food, the plates. How much do you have to pay for your permit?
Before it was 22K.
17,000.
How much does a license cost if you get it from the city?
I think 400.
And who are you paying?
The permit owner.
You're not paying the city.
No.
You pay the permit owner $22,000 just so you can sell this food.
Yes.
And who is this?
A random guy.
Have you ever applied for a permit?
Yeah, I'm applied and no come anything.
It's long wait. Number 3,800 something. And
After 2 years, you're number 3,800.
yes.
These are the 4 bills that are sitting in the city council right now, which would give these vendors their own permits and make your halal more affordable.
Is that a winner? Is that the next mayor of New York?
Totally brilliant ad. He understood exactly what demographic he was speaking to, exactly what generation he was speaking to. I remember even to this day, I'll go out at, when the bars are open at 4 a.m. and, everything shuts down, but there's only one lone soldier who's willing to feed you at 4 a.m. in New York City, and that's the halal cart guy. And so everyone in New York of a certain age knows that guy, knows how much that plate costs. When we were young, it cost about $5 a plate, $6 a plate. Now it's $10. It's just a brilliant way to show that he understands New York, New Yorkers, a certain generation, and might I also add, he managed to sell deregulation as taking on the establishment.
Exactly.
That is the actual magic in his messaging in that ad, and I just think that it was just a brilliant strategy and a brilliant tactic.
There was a real Zoomer energy to it. I mean, there was a real sense that it was an authentic interaction he was having among New Yorkers as one of them. And I'm looking at this thinking about all of the slick 30-second spots that the consultants in New York and Washington put together of like somebody riding a bull or on a tank or on a construction site pointing at things. And it kind of seems like this is the wave of the future, especially it's not just anything to knock down the Cuomo dynasty in New York. Like, these are people who don't lose elections in New York. And he did it. Did he have considerably fewer resources? How did he fund this?
Well, I think a lot of it was small dollar donations. I mean, there's talk of him coming from a wealthy family and all that, but really a lot the money kind of didn't matter here. I think that you could see just through the campaign how it all ended up in front of us, right? Like, for example, one of the things that he did, there were these policies that he's talking about. State-run grocery stores, freezing the rent, things like this. And then on his opponents, like a Cuomo or, Brad Lander, everyone else talked about Trump and talked about how they were going to fight Trump. So there was kind of, when you talk about Cuomo and Mamdani, okay, Mamdani is, proposing freezing rents and stuff. He might be a psychopath, but he wants to govern the city, as opposed to like Cuomo, who might have been capable of governing, but he wanted to run for president, right? And that's why he's bringing up Trump and all this stuff. And I think that kind of showed where the priorities are, and a lot of people were just like, at least he's talking about me and or like the problems that concern me and not talking about Trump. And so I think that there's a certain angle to that. And I just think that there was an authenticity to his campaign.
Talk about the big long walk.
Oh man, this is a lot of people, there's many people can pick their favorite brilliant spots of this campaign. My favorite one is where he did this walk in Manhattan from the very tippy top of Manhattan in Inwood Heights all the way down to Battery Park. That is not a short walk. And he filmed the whole thing throughout the whole day, just shaking hands on his way down there. And you know what? That does a lot of things. First of all, he showed that he did the walk. 2, it shows that he's young and energetic and vigorous, right? And 3, he went and shook hands and showed that all those different demographics and sections and areas of the city, it's very diverse as you get from the north to the south, and he went and shook hands with all of them. This is the way of the future. And again, the authenticity is what really breaks through with this guy.
The finance bros are in total freak out meltdown mode right now. The finance bros see this as a real reshaping of the economic image of New York City, the business image, the ability they're going to have to be able to accumulate wealth, to be able to spend money. And you've got some of these strong Democrat voices really wondering where they're going to put their support. So here's the question. Did they ultimately co-opt this guy? I mean, we've seen so many of these figures like AOC. Are you telling me AOC isn't co-opted? AOC was kind of the Mandami of her time.
Yeah.
Because she was going to come from the streets of New York, be authentic, fight for socialism, take on the establishment. AOC didn't even have the ink dry on her election certificate before she was voting for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House, and just in a straight Washington power deal where she got to be on the Oversight Committee and got to be on the Financial Services Committee. So she had a price, Pelosi paid it, and the thing is, AOC has never actually recovered from that. Like, what's the big battle where AOC took on the Democrat establishment? I mean, there was a full woke-topian ballast in the Biden White House that was running things there. It's not like she shaped the nature of what Biden was doing during his presidency. And so does this guy go down a similar path, or is he able to maintain some distance from those forces?
I think that, first of all, he will be, because I don't think this is a one-to-one comparison in that regard. Yeah, maybe they're similar in ideology or tactics, but their field and environment is actually way different, and the seat that they get to sit in is way different. AOC is one of 435.
Careful.
Careful. Listen, you know the problems that arise around having to get along with the people that are around you in order to get anything done. Whereas Mamdani is going for an executive level position, and he's got a lot of unilateral power as the mayor of New York City, right? And so it's just, there is this kind of like
So can they beat him? I mean, we were doing the math on the show this week with different. Okay, if you take Eric Adams and a substantial portion of the black vote, and if maybe some Republicans really are scared of Mandami and go with Adams, can that build something? There was a very quickly discussed reemergence of Cuomo in the general election as a possibility. That seems to have been snuffed out. You're saying this guy has got the riz, he has got the message, he shocked the establishment in this primary, and he's going to do what every other winner of the Democratic primary does in pretty recent memory, and that is to go on to become the mayor of our.
Oh yeah, I mean,
city.
listen, as things stand right now, if whatever is in play as it is continues, this guy will win. He has the voter intensity. New York City's low turnout elections, so it all depends. It's low turnout in general, so it all depends on energized people going out and getting other voters to turn them out for you. And so he's got that in the bag.
So once he does that, Is his face on every mail piece in the midterms? Do the Republicans seize on this and say, this is the new face of the Democratic Party? Someone who is an avowed socialist, someone who believes in like freezing rent and having communist government-run grocery stores? Or does that not work in like a swing district in Des Moines?
It's just not going to work anymore. It's just not going to work. You're talking about New York City in a certain way. People will be like,
No, I mean using it more broadly.
yeah, but I mean, I don't think that it's going to work. Instead of you have to. It's better that we try to crack why he won, as opposed to just kind of using him. Because yeah, we can use him that. Whatever I say doesn't matter. He's going to be used in that way as sort of this, scare figure in the off years, in the run up to the midterm, right? Like they did to Marjorie in 2021, right? I think they'll use that, but I don't think it's not going to be as effective as anyone's going to hope.
All right, so there has to be that person that's the archetype, right? We saw Democrats try to scare swing voters with the out of context statements by Marjorie Taylor Greene, or that I remember giving a speech and talking about the Second Amendment in Silicon Valley, and then they spliced it together like I wanted to see people executed in Silicon Valley, which was totally bogus and false.
Right.
But if you're looking at our side, obviously they're going to use Trump.
Yeah.
Jasmine Crockett is my nominee. Jasmine Crockett is my nominee for the face of the Democratic Party.
She's been that.
You think she's achieved it?
I think she's already. I think she's been that in these last couple of months.
No. Yeah, I think there's work to do for Jasmine Crockett to really be presented in these frontline swing districts as like the idea center for their viewpoint, and just the tone, like the tone of that you get out of Jasmine Crockett is, this is the weird stuff that we want to do with the government, and if you don't like it, like there's a combativeness to it.
Well, I think she's already. When I say that, I think she's already being brought, like she's being primed for that. And you know how these cycles go. The money starts rolling around, the end of the year, and then beginning of next year, they're going to be putting her face all over America in these swing districts, and I think they'll do the same with Zoran. Clearly a literal self-described socialist. So I mean that's not hard. But I do.
Who do you think's the most valuable Democrat surrogate in the midterms? If those are the boogeymen, who do they look to and say, this is who I want in my district campaigning for me in these frontline areas?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I haven't seen anyone who's really been capable of doing that. I mean, that's why they're defaulting to the fighters.
Yeah, but you gotta do the exercise with me here. Obama was the chosen closer,
right,
in 2024, in 2022, in 20. I mean, he has been the perennial closer, and it just didn't kick the same way this last time. If you really get into the math of where Trump reshaped a lot of these precincts, it's in these urban areas where people just weren't going to show up for Kamala Harris, and Obama was who they were sending to Detroit, to Philly. So I think that you got to think about, does anyone today eclipse that? Does a Gavin Newsom eclipse that? If you're in, think about like the Mike Lawler district that the Democrats will definitely come for in New York.
Yes.
Does Gavin Newsom play to that crowd?
No.
Why not?
Gavin Newsom doesn't play to that crowd because we're in a big, state with its own rep like New York, and Gavin Newsom, the number one thing that he gets painted even amongst normies is like, how did you mess up California? That's the number one question anybody has. Like, how do you screw up a perfect state? And so I don't think he's going to be somebody who's useful to campaign in that. You might actually get a better shot with AOC or Bernie Sanders.
Really?
Showing up in that.
Really? You're nominating them for potential top?
Well, because it's actually, there's a heavy Jewish population there in Muncie and Orange County, and so Bernie's Jewish, so, and then AOC, that county, that area is not that far from where AOC actually grew up, which is Yorktown Heights, so like there's certainly an appeal there. There's a suburban, well off, moneyed suburban populace there. Also, the first person that's going to come in there and say, I'm going to get you your SALT deductions back, that's also going to be a winner. So
I think Trump campaigns real hard in these midterms and shows up in a lot of these swing districts because he doesn't want to see that House of Representatives fall into the hands of Hakeem Jeffries and completely change how every day is lived out at the White House.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, look, as long as Trump is not on the ballot, it's really hard to turn out those voters. It just is, right? We've seen this in 2018. We've seen this in 2022, the red wave that we were supposed to have, right?
So you're pessimistic about the midterms?
I mean, I don't see right now, especially with, this sort of kind of fracturing with the Israel-Iran talk and all that. I don't see the energy there to with these normie, low propensity Trump voters to come out if Trump is not on the ticket. Like, what are they coming out?
Well, I think that you can make a compelling case to low propensity voters that the fight isn't over, and that if the Congress swings to the Democrats, if their governor becomes a Democrat, that the very policies that they voted against in Kamala Harris, the sex changes for the illegal alien prisoners, the demand for equity over merit, the growth of government deeper into people's lives, that is going to be a concerning thing. And I actually think that if you have Trump out there as the principal messenger, people are going to want to see him continue to be successful.
I get that, but I think low propensity voters and normies, their issues are generally closer to home, and I think they want to see victories. The way Donald Trump wins and gets people out is by delivering victories.
And they will point to the border.
Yeah, and yes, the border, but I mean, the border was like the 2016 issue being addressed now. We want the deportation.
Well, sure, and those are happening. I mean, we saw recently, there was this last week, a large facility in North Carolina where the ICE raid occurred, and the owners or the people who were involved in acquiring illegal immigrant labor were going to be charged with federal crimes.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think that has a sweeping effect on a lot of these enterprises that have been utilizing illegal labor for a long time?
I mean, yes, for now, but voters have short memories, and they're gonna go. I mean, by a year from now, unless there's 10 of those happening a day that we can point to, there are going to be people who are going to say that he's not delivering the way either we expected him or you expected him, right? It's a way to come at you and say, oh, Trump is not holding.
Well, this is the historical challenge for presidents in the first midterm, right? Because when you are at the beginning of electing someone, anything is possible. Right. Every dream of what they would accomplish with an executive order or a piece of legislation or a foreign engagement, everything is rosy, and people stare at the ink blot and see what they want to see.
Yep.
And the reality is Washington has contours of power. It's not a town that does a lot of things simultaneously well.
No.
It's kind of one drawn focus. And that focus has been on a lot of these foreign policy questions now. I think that with the coming weeks, you have to assume Trump's going to get the big bite at his economic agenda with this big bill. And so I think there's still enough to engage those voters. I do think they have to have a reason. I think there are certain pitfalls you can't go into, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But there was this mouse of an issue this week that roared like a lion on our show, on our daily talk show. And it's this issue of AI preemption in the One Big Beautiful Bill legislation.
Yeah.
So here's the state of play. When the bill was passed out of the House of Representatives, a provision was put into the bill saying that states were banned from engaging in any AI regulation for some moratorium of years. Now, oftentimes that occurs when you're also doing a degree of federal regulation, because what you don't want is to be enacting simultaneously a federal regulatory structure and then 50 different state structures. And then sometimes you just don't want the regulation to occur, so you impose a moratorium and then do nothing. Well, there's a concern that's what's happening here, that people who wanted to have no AI regulation tucked into the bill, a moratorium on the states, but with no framework for how the federal government would answer major questions about AI. And Marjorie Taylor Greene came on our program. She said that if that provision was not stripped out of the bill, she would not vote for the bill. That landed big time because it is going to draw a lot of focus into this question. And I understand why you wouldn't want a patchwork system. We don't have 50 different cell phone regulations. We don't have 50 different internets where the Louisiana internet is different than the Florida internet. But on AI, she thought that some states would be very aggressive in limiting AI's ability to impact the workforce, and she wanted them to have the ability to do that. Is this something that's going to break down on partisan lines, Republican, Democrat, or are you going to see kind of a corporatized position on this and a more populist position, Vish Burra?
I think that this is going to fracture actually multiple different ways, right? There's actually a bunch of questions that are rolled into that, right? Marjorie brings up actually the kind of the social cost question and the economic question, right? What do you do when you have X thousand amount of truck drivers or, longshoremen that are out of a job overnight because AI has taken their jobs, right? How do we address that? Even if it's happening in my state, how do I address that? And if there, like you said, if there's no framework, there's that aspect. Then there's the ethics aspect of it too, where it's like, what should we allow the AI to be able to train on and what not to be able to train on, right? That's also a question. Then there's the corporatized question, or even the national security question as well. If we're trying to compete with China, right, on their AI and they're training their models on data that, just binging on data, and we're over here fretting about whether or not you're allowed to train it on Mickey Mouse, and Disney's up in your grill about that, right? Then it's being hampered. Is Florida or Disney, anyone allowed to address that in the first place?
Well, so let's do that. Let's get into that question, because you know what I think it's really analogous to? Space. In the 90s, there was this belief that Russia, the United States, would be in a space arms race. And Bill Clinton really diminished the investment the United States made in space arms because he didn't want to ignite that type of an escalatory environment. Well, all that did was retard our growth in space weaponized innovation. Nobody else stopped. But our advantage was really collapsed in a short term of years. Now we're a lot smarter about that. Now we have offensive and defensive R&D in space. We're not even sheepish or shy about it. And I wonder if that's kind of like what it's going to be with AI, where if we've got this advantage because companies like ChatGPT or XAI or Anduril or United States-based companies that utilize a lot of AI, Meta. We don't want to lose that and have a Chinese weaponized system leapfrog us.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? We don't want to find out after after the competitor's AI blows us out or does something nasty.
So you're for no regulation. You're for let this puppy run.
This one is a very difficult one. Yes, I am for no regulation because
it's very hard to find an issue where you and Marjorie Taylor Greene aren't aligned. So this is a rarity. We really had to tweeze for this one.
Yeah, this is where like I have a background in tech, and I know that any sort of restriction like that is going to retard the development of the tech and just put it through crazy bureaucratic process, and you won't be able to develop it fast. And if you really take the China AI threat seriously, as I do, I take everything China seriously, right? And so, in that regard, I want my AI to be better than theirs, on that sort of national security basis. So I need my guys working in that R&D department untethered and bringing about like cool stuff that we can keep China at bay with. With that being on that, but that's on that national security front. On the economic front is where I'm like, well, wait a minute, you can't just replace all my truck drivers and my longshoremen.
Which those are the first one to be. Those are very vulnerable populations to replacement.
Exactly. So that's where that's where I'm trying to trying to unwind some of these different lines where it's like on an economic front, maybe there should be some kind of regulation, but on an innovation front, I'm not a fan of that, right? And then on the ethical front as well that's also a great question that it's really hard. Like what are AI models allowed to be trained on and what not to be trained on, right? And
I don't think you're going to be able to regulate around that. I think that they are going to become so proficient at devouring source information, and they're gonna learn ways to acquire source information that they.
And then I'm back to my the Marjorie position where it's like, AI is going to be a demon if that's the case. They're already, like I said, but with the bear training that they have now, they're already scamming, they're already blackmailing, they're ready to take over the entire crime market in America, And so if that, if the more data they have and the more powerful and proficient they become with those root qualities being, in that system, you're looking at something that's going to be a demon. And so then, back to the
Would you ever vote for like an AI congressman? I feel like some of them are just the worst. They're like an AI that's 25 years behind, that's been trained on like the worst stuff and are constrained by it.
I not an AI congressman, but I've always played around with a theory in my head that actually most, if not all, of the bureaucracy can be replaced by blockchain technology. Right. And it's because, what is really a bureaucrat doing besides taking a paper on one end and then passing it to the other? And, with a smart contract.
But could AI evaluate Social Security disability claims, evaluate VA claims?
Yeah.
You're cool with that?
I would rather for the bureaucrats, yes, because you got to remove the whole problem of the deep state is the human bias involved in it. And so you removing the accusation that there was any particular person behind this, right? And with their own political agenda and just a technological agenda defined by X equals, Y plus Z, that would be a much more, I think, safer system.
I'm cool starting with it delivering the mail. Like if AI can deliver the mail better, let's start with that before you get to like the VA claims and the IRS. The big foreign policy news of the week was not China. It was this war with Iran and Israel. I'm not going to pretend that we're privy to all the information who are like still working on congressional staffs and in Congress are privy to, but it does seem like we can take a moment to note the changing state of play around how politicians in both parties are thinking about and talking about Israel. When I first got to Congress, AIPAC was obviously a very, very strong influence organization, and there just wasn't a political incentive or an incentive otherwise to speak an ill word of Israel. And it was very bipartisan. And there were always trips to Israel that Republicans and Democrats would go on together, deepen their connection to their own faith, to their own sense of history. And then the woke left took off, right, in a very ugly and dark direction with almost calls to genocide, which we oppose and find repugnant. And you saw a resentment, I think, among a lot of young men on the right that Israel had been an animating or motivating factor in the United States' excessive entanglement in the Middle East, which the younger generation resents, and I think fairly and rightly.
Sure.
And then you've got the Boomer Coalition, the Fox News watching Boomer Coalition, and we have some of these people in our friend groups and even in our families. Right. And that crowd kind of, I think, still really is responsive to the siren song that this is some sort of crusade whenever we are led by Netanyahu or some of the more radical elements within his government into these bloody sands of the desert. And, I really think this 12-day war is going to go down as a significant moment in that shifting Rubik's Cube of Israel analysis, because President Trump created a permission structure to be critical.
Yeah.
When he dropped an F-bomb on Israel and Iran simultaneously, when he directly criticized Netanyahu and Israel, when he talked about the offense that Israel had committed launching a massive ordnance system as Trump was trying to hold this peace deal together, trying to really form it out of clay at the banks of the Jordan River.
Right.
And, that I think is going to allow more Republicans in particular to be honest with our friend. And it's not friendship when you can never be honest with the other side. It's not friendship when you cannot be critical.
Yep.
The opportunity here, I think, is to have a stronger, more durable, more productive relationship with Israel by injecting a little more truth into it. And that is only made possible because of, I think, the wisdom and the political bravery of Donald Trump.
Yeah, look, this is going to be a historical moment. I think it exposed a lot of, those sentiments that have developed over these last 20, 30 years, and that's just naturally going to happen.
Well, and it's all labeled as anti-Semitism.
That's
and some of it is, by the way.
Okay.
I mean, some of it is explicitly anti-Semitic, but like that is a component of criticism of Netanyahu or Israel. It is not the whole pie, and there's plenty of just policy disagreement that unfairly gets kind of conflated with anti-Semitism.
And by the way, that's also part of what's kind of, and if you overuse that term, you cry wolf too much, it starts losing its power when and you're not able to use it when it actually applies, and that's like really the driving force. And so right now, more than anything, what you're seeing is the generational divide show itself. Right, there was a sound clip of ADL head Jonathan Greenblatt that had gone viral, where he explicitly says, this is not a left or right problem. This is a generation problem. This is a TikTok problem. The young people don't really sympathize or empathize with Israel the way previous generations have, namely the boomers. And, when you see it on the left, it's, I believe, mainly driven by resent. Because they're colonial, they're white, right? And so that's
kind of it becomes a new vestige of the white supremacy.
Yes, exactly. So that's that. So the left is done with Israel on that front, right? A white colonial project, and then on the right, I think it's more apathy than it is any kind of resent. Yeah, I think that there's a real politic. Like, yeah, they're our ally. They'll lie to us sometimes. We'll lie to them. Okay, right? I don't mind that relationship in a certain sense, but what I don't want to is to deal with it anymore, right? To how much more of our blood and treasure are we going to have? Spilled in, just fill in the country in the Middle East here. I don't care whether it's Israel or Iran or what. Can we focus on us? Is that possible? Right? That's why issues like freezing rent and state-run grocery stores in the New York City primary play better than trying to accuse Zohran Mamdani of being anti-Israel, right, in a heavily Jewish city like New York.
Well, they did try that, and
it failed.
He led into it with moments like this in the debate when in an interview where he said he would arrest Netanyahu.
No, as mayor, New York City would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. This is a city that our values are in line with international law. It's time that our actions are also.
Even though the U.S. is not a signatory to the ICC?
No, it's time that we actually step up and make clear what we are willing to do to showcase the leadership that is sorely missing in the federal administration.
So, Vish, how does a guy like that get votes from the Jewish community in New York?
Well, because there's a young Jewish community
that doesn't like Netanyahu.
That doesn't
conflate the government of Israel with their affinity for Jewish people.
To them, Netanyahu is a right-wing kook, right? And they're against a lot of right-wingers. In his government, he's the right-wing guy, right? Or at least the moderate. I'm sure there's more to the right of him, but that's their view of him. And, there's a split down the Orthodox Jews versus the Reform Jews and all that. It's a diverse religion, too. And so there's different people, different sections of this voting for different interests. But, yes, even that's split, right? And so when you split up the Jewish vote in New York City, right, then that's where even this bloc is not able to kind of stop this guy from who would arrest Bibi.
And Trump seems to have come out of the 12-day war, I think, with a lot of respect from the foreign policy realism community, that this strike didn't draw us in to an extended entanglement in the Middle East. And at the same time, I think, maybe not Mark Levin, who's breathing in and out of a paper bag heavily, but for a lot of people who consider themselves pro-Israel, they would say, well, here Trump did something good for Israel. I don't think he lost really anything from either side. There are a few voices that are more opposed to a strong U.S.-Israel relationship who are a little burned. But at the end of the day, if Trump has 4 years where we don't get involved or entangled in a foreign war, he'll still be able to make the claim he made following his first presidency when he killed Soleimani.
Trump, art of the deal, masterclass yet again. He manages to get both sides of the conversation to go home feeling like they won something. The pro-Israel side still gets to go home and say,
Fordo.
Yeah, Fordo, we blew it up, we got at them, we set their nuclear capabilities back, whatever. And then the apathy, like, I don't want to get involved in the Middle East stuff anymore, say, hey, as long as we're not going to war, as long as we're not deploying boots on the ground, as long as we're not doing shock and awe airstrikes every day, I'm fine with that. I think that's what, he's not getting us into a hot war, and I think he did it again and just kept both sides happy, and both sides get to go home and claim victory.
If you've been looking for a pharmacy where you can order online and get your meds shipped right to your door, this is the one. All Family Pharmacy makes it easy. Just select what you need: ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, daily meds, travel kits, so much more. And they take care of the rest. They work with doctors to get you safe, reliable prescriptions and ship them right to you. Over 100,000 Americans already trust them, and you should too. This is my go-to for supplements, antibiotics, and everything that I need. They're changing the game. They're giving you real access to the meds that matter so you can keep your medicine cabinet stocked and stay prepared. Check them out. You'll probably find something you've been meaning to get your hands on. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Use code MATT20 to get 20% off today. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Enjoy. If you had to compare Trump's Middle East policy to one recent president, it's not all that dissimilar to Bill Clinton's. Like, Bill Clinton had a policy in the Middle East that was a lot like mowing the grass. Like, we weren't going to move in and become your landscape designer, but if the weeds got too tall here or there, I think he bombed Afghanistan after as the Lewinsky thing was going on, but they were getting a little feisty, so he dropped some bombs. But we never really stayed. We would drop some bombs, we would fly home. Everything was kind of over the horizon. We didn't get too involved. We didn't get too nosy. We didn't get too judgy with anybody and their cultures or their human rights.
Right.
And we saw it as an economic transaction, which it was a very different day economically, because in those Clinton years we were so much more reliant on oil that was coming out of the Gulf than we are now that Trump increased production.
Yeah.
But there are similarities that I see with the Trump Middle East policy and the Clinton Middle East policy. And in between, we had these epic failures of Bush, Obama, Biden, where Biden was enriching them. Obama was doubling down on the Afghanistan war. Bush was trying to create a Jeffersonian democracy out of every sand dune.
I look, and I think obviously Trump is still, what you want to call him, a Republican or a Democrat or whatever, he's still like a New York guy, close with the Clintons even, at the time coming up. They're and 90s, we all remember the 90s as being like a great prosperous time for America. People still yearn for it to this day in nostalgia. Yeah, I think that there is a similarity, because I think that's a policy that's probably palatable for most of the American electorate.
Well, it's normative and it is realist.
Yeah.
And like Clinton, for all of his flaws, was not fanciful.
Yeah.
He was not unrealistic. He was not trying to like exceed the bounds of the possible.
Right.
That's how he was able to do the deals that he did with Newt Gingrich on a policy run. Yeah. I know what the comments are going to be on this pod. Everyone's going to be like, Matt Gaetz is defending Bill Clinton. They're both the worst people on the planet Earth. But just on policy grounds, on the Middle East, I think that you would not compare Trump more to any other recent president. I mean, even George H.W. Bush had us boots on the ground involved in repelling Saddam from Kuwait.
That's right. And so I think that I like you said, normative, realistic. This is what the American people want anyway. And there's so much of our generation.
Does it play out again in the Republican primary for president in 2020? Like, this fight isn't over for that?
No.
Okay.
No. This is definitely okay.
I get the same sense.
Oh, no.
But there'll be like a Nikki Haley, John Bolton, Liz Cheney foreign policy.
This is going to be a blistering question, right? Because there's going to be a full court press on everything that was said over the 12-day war is not just between Israel and Iran here. There's a couple of factions that went at it, and they both...
Of which you were one.
Of course I was.
Yes.
And I'm proud to have stood where I stood. And everyone's gathering screenshots, making lists of each other, and who said what, because those things are going to be deployed in a primary. I don't know for who, I don't know for what, for which side, right? But this is something where it's going to be about, who do we listen to? Oh, do you want that guy in power next to the guy who's running? This is what he said during the 12-day war, right? Everything in politics is a time bomb. It's not about what happens immediately. Sure, there's some effect there, but it's about how it comes back and haunts you over time. And so that is where this is all going to come rear its ugly head during the 28 primary.
We know Vice President Vance is a listener of the podcast. We appreciate him a great deal for that, and we think very highly of him. I actually think J.D. Vance comes out of the 12-day war even stronger.
Oh, but you know who's noticed that Vance tried to come out of the 12-day war stronger? Mark Levin.
Yes.
Mark Levin.
He took a shot, didn't he? Took a little shot.
When the story came out that Vance, had tried to convince Trump last second not to do it, Levin goes and points it out. Hey, Vance, what's up with this? Signal, not noise.
And what's the signal? The signal is the neocon side is going to try to paint Vance, as some opposite, figure within the Trump administration.
They will call him an anti-Semite. No. They are going to, do not. They will do it. They will do anything.
That is so far from the truth.
No, that's so far from the truth, right? But remember how the 12-day war played out, what criticisms were levied, what actions were taken, and what they were labeled, right? And so this turning a mountain out of a molehill. They're going to take that little thing where and what they're going to say is he leaked that. He leaked that to give himself cover for a time like this, to say, oh, yeah, I was against the war the whole time, right? And so then they're going to be like, yeah, he did that because he still wants to keep the anti-Semite vote on his side, right? The woke right vote. I'm telling you, they're going to do it. They're going to do it.
So when you say they, I want to think for a moment, who will be like the neocon champion rising in 2028?
This is not even hard.
I know the answer.
This is not even going to be difficult.
The answer,
they cross over. The answer is 1, 2, 3.
Ron DeSantis.
Right? The crossover between the people who showed themselves during the 12-day war and who showed themselves through the great influencer battles of 2023, 2024. If you laid the lists on top of each other, they are practically identical. So it's going to be Ron DeSantis who's going to be deploying these attacks.
So we could imagine a 2028 presidential contest where you've got like the foreign policy realism folks, J.D. Vance, who we like a great deal, Marco Rubio, who we like a great deal, and then there's going to be the neocon kind of Nikki Haley lane.
Right.
And you think that DeSantis goes right into that? That'll be a very well-resourced lane.
Oh, yeah.
There will be a lot of money for those who are willing to repeat the talking points that, peace through strength means invade everywhere and invite everyone.
Yes. No, that's exactly that's going to be the lane. Like you said, it's well funded. And, that's where, and it would be very interesting.
Who else, if for whatever reason DeSantis doesn't run, what figures in the Republican Party do you think are like yearning to occupy that lane?
I mean, I don't think Nikki Haley has a shot anymore, but she might be the top pick after that.
I think she does run again.
You think she does run again?
I do.
Oh, yeah.
I think running for president is an itch that doesn't go away with one scratch.
Oh, well,
especially for a gal like Nikki Haley.
And Nikki would be the top one on that.
Okay.
I think that there is somebody.
Tom Cotton.
Oh my God.
Tom Cotton wants to be president.
Oh, he'll do it in a heartbeat.
And I think would be a strong presenter from a debate standpoint for that viewpoint.
Yeah, but he's not likable. So, I mean, yes.
You've never met Tom Cotton. You don't know how likable he is. He's a perfectly likable guy.
Listen, I get what I get through the screen, and
he doesn't give you want to have a beer together vibes the way JD Vance does.
No way. He's just not likable. So I'm not too worried about him in that regard. And I just don't think he's put in the work to try to appeal to the new media environment either. So he's not practiced in that, and so I don't think he'll be able to go toe to toe with a Vance or even DeSantis is a little better with his media game in that regard. You know, you hate to see it, but like he went viral for all the wrong reasons in 23 and 24, like the high heels and the white boots or whatever, and all that. But he still tries. You see him putting out messaging. Cotton doesn't really do that. So, and then Vance will blow out both of them. So on that front. So I'm not worried about that.
President's going to get his bill in the coming weeks. We've had senators on our program this week talking about their concerns, the fact that they haven't gotten there yet. But we're going to be doing this podcast in the coming weeks, breaking down what out of this bill is going to emerge to deliver those wins you were talking about at the beginning of this discussion. You say, look, if you're going to motivate these low propensity voters, you have to show them the money. You have to show them the policy wins. What in here do you really think people are going to pull out and be able to cut through the noise with the electorate? Because it's a lot of border stuff. I think the no tax on tips is real. And I think that could actually be an interesting little diamond for people to come out and say, you feel that. You feel that, right? A lot of this stuff, man, infrastructure 5 years down the road, a project in somebody's district they want to run on that, they're at a ribbon cutting, but nothing's really happening. No tax on tips, Republicans will be able to run on and say they did it.
Let me ask you this. Do you think no tax on overtime makes it?
Yeah.
Okay. You got a real winner there. Yes, tips. There's a certain part of the economy, obviously very populated, a lot of normies. That's going to be huge. And yes, that's something you run on. The no tax on overtimes, that is going to be critical for those young working class white men that we've been pining for in the Midwest.
Well, and a lot of the blue collar,
yes,
Hispanic men, black men, everybody.
I mean, everybody, yes, but like there is a certain there's especially
it's the young men with no families who can work overtime.
Yeah,
if you're in your 40s or 50s and you got a wife and kid at home because your generation could afford those things, that's what you're doing. But if you're some 26-year-old who hasn't been able to get a down payment and have a house, you haven't met your person yet to start a family, well then maybe you're actually picking up those overtime shifts.
Yes, exactly. So so I think that's going to be critical. I would be running all over the country with the no tax on overtimes, no tax on tips, but the number one thing we should never lose sight. This is actually a great mass deportations bill, and I think that gets lost throughout everything. The funding for ICE. And then also, I think that
so you actually think you can point to an increased frequency in the deportations,
yes,
and say this bill is why you're seeing this
number, like the COVID counter during 2020. We should have something like that, and the faster those numbers go up, I'm telling you, that's going to push the votes.
Oh yeah,
that's just an easy illustrative way. The way Thomas Massey walks around with the debt clock counter on his chest. If we had something like that where it's going up nonstop, that is the kind of thing that's going to get low propensity voters out.
Well, we shall see. Thank you, as always, for joining me. And make sure to always tune into the Matt Gaetz Show, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 Pacific, here on One American News. You can follow me on X, @Matt Gaetz. tune in next week. We'll have more Anchormen for you.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and The Matt Gaetz Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and watch today.